All right, so hello everyone. My name is Katie and I am an ACP graduate 2008 and I am recording this video for your careers library fresh in 2021. At this point we've been battling the coronavirus for pretty much a year, so what I'd like to do is use our situation as a kind of, our current situation as a kind of metaphor. We're talking about you guys starting up your careers. Now, especially at this point in your life, the concept of career is really overburdened. There's a lot of stress about what you're going to study, what you're going to do. But the thing is, a career can be fluid and unpredictable. Like now, you don't always know what's going to happen or how things are going to turn out. So my first piece of advice for you guys is don't stress too much. Do something that you are interested in, that you are passionate about. There's always going to be a fair amount of insecurity or disappointment. Some things will fail, sometimes it will hurt, but you just have to carry on. Being really good at something or excelling in something takes hard work. And the most important thing is that you apply yourself no matter the circumstances around you. And the jobs and the career will kind of just follow suit. So I work in the nonprofit sector, predominantly international education or education development. I've spent about 3 years in Africa, mostly Somalia or Somaliland, which is a northern part of Somalia, 2 years in China, a couple of years in the Middle East. But the funny thing is that when I was at ECP, I really wanted to be a politician. I can't say I picked universities all that meticulously. I remember partially picking the University of Exeter because how sunny and beautiful the campus was. But I mean, if you're going to spend 3 to 5 years somewhere, you might as well feel comfortable. I also don't believe that it matters if you're one of those people that don't know exactly what you want to do right now or what you want to study. There's a lot of very, very successful people who ended up excelling in something completely different than they went off studying. For me, all the universities that I was looking at had one thing in common, which was a very interesting international relations and politics course. So the advice that I would give you in terms of this stage in your professional development is really do your research. Look into universities here in the Czech Republic or abroad, whatever country you are interested in. Look into the course, the modules, the required reading, and make sure that you end up picking the thing that you were really the most excited about. Despite my earlier ambition of being a politician, when I embarked on my university journey, I realized that politics was really not for me. I found several of the classes quite dull, but over time and through a plethora of modules and part-time jobs and spontaneous decisions, I found my way to the field of development and the nonprofit sector. Which was something I was really intrigued by, not just for its span, its impact, variety, and urgency, but also for the joy and the cohesion and really the interconnectedness of humanity that the field exuberates. If you already know that you are interested in the nonprofit sector or charity work or international development, then that means you're probably a very passionate person or you're very passionate about a specific cause or even several causes. The problem here is that our capacity as a person, our time and capacity is limited. And usually the impact of very broad range projects is not as powerful. So what I would recommend is that you really try to narrow down what specific cause you would most like to contribute to and prioritize. When I was at school, I was exactly one of those people that one day would be interested in human rights violations in Egypt, and the next day I would be like, oh my God, I really want to help underprivileged kids in Nepal. So what do you do when you kind of leap from one thing to another? One of my professors gave me uh, this really good advice that helped me narrow things down. And he said, if you're walking down the street and you only have one penny in your pocket, and in front of you there's a couple of charity collectors, and each one represents a different cause. One of them might be human rights, one of them might be environment, one of them animal rights. But you only have that one penny. Which one would you give it to? Now, usually the best answer is the one that kind of just pops out without you thinking, because that one really comes from the heart. If you overthink it too much, it doesn't work. So, moving on into the nonprofit sector a little more directly, the most important piece of advice that I can really give you is volunteer. Try to get as much experience as you can working in the field. Now, please don't use this as an excuse not to study, otherwise, your teachers might kill me. But especially in the nonprofit sector, the experience and working in the field or volunteering in the field is ultimately more important than any course or any university that you choose. Whilst you're studying, try to use the time that you have to get as involved as you can. It doesn't matter if it's paid or unpaid. I mean, at the beginning, it's mostly going to be unpaid. That's just how it works. But try to get involved in a little like local charities or maybe like rural development projects, just to get a taste of how things work and maybe what the different roles are, what you can do. Now, at this point, you're probably asking, well, where on earth am I supposed to get this experience? Well, that's the best thing about universities. You can do so much. When I was in Exeter, I joined Amnesty International, I joined UNICEF on campus. You can really try out loads of different things. It's all about creativity and initiative. And even these little things that you start doing early on can really have a huge impact and contribute to you building your kind of professional career. In my third year at university, I interned at the Devon County Council, through which I found this little NGO called Arsansar, which is a British Nepalese NGO that works with orphans in rural areas of Nepal. And coincidentally, a couple of years later, I interned at that organization and then started working for it, and then ended up going to Nepal as part of the relief work team after the 2015 earthquakes. Gaining as much experience volunteering, and even more so if you can volunteer abroad somewhere, is invaluable on more than just the personal level. For any developmental project to truly be efficient and effective, it has to be localized and tailored to the particular community or nation or area that it is targeting. So with this in mind, you can understand that the impact a project will have will be limited if it doesn't include the local input and local ownership. Real progress in any field can only be achieved if the work, the development is sustainable. And how can it be sustainable if it has no ownership of the local communities, or if you as the project manager don't really understand the structural issues at hand, the local conflicts, the local circumstances? It just doesn't work. And at that point, money gets wasted. People become disillusioned with what you are doing, and it's a downward spiral. I definitely wouldn't recommend going anywhere for less than 3 weeks or a month, because the impact that you have is really minimal. But the burden that it has on the local community or the hosting family can actually be quite large. The next big no that I would highlight would be for you to look for work experience through one of those charity travel agencies. Usually, the trips that they offer are extremely expensive. They offer for example, environmental stays or orphanage stays in developing countries for 2 to 3 weeks. And again, as I mentioned, the impact that you have there is really small, and the money doesn't actually end up with the local community. Most of it is spent on administration costs with this middleman. So, to make it sound a little less depressing, what I would suggest from my experience is just use your own initiative. There's so much that you can do without having to rely on someone else organizing things for you. You can always get in touch with a local organization. Again, do your research, look what is needed, look at different grassroots organizations that work there, get in touch with those. You can also form a local group, for example, at the school, with whom you reach out to small NGOs working in the sector of your interest. You can organize events, do some fundraising, spread the word about their cause, and then potentially even initiate a visit. Now, when I was at university, again, what we did was we formed this organization called Be the Change Society. At first, we started working locally, and then we managed to get in touch with an Italian-Palestinian cooperation called Maya. Together, we raised money for children living in the Jenin refugee camp. Over the next summer holidays, we traveled to Palestine for several weeks. And we taught English, we did some sports training. We also managed to form some long-term partnerships with local Palestinian NGOs working to promote women empowerment. And the entire experience was extremely eye-opening and rewarding. I totally fell in love with Palestine. I vowed to come back one day, which I did around 2 years later. But most of all, the coolest thing about all of it is that the initiative back at University of Exeter still continues. So they still have the Be the Change Society, and they have managed to upkeep all of these partnerships in Palestine. So, if all of this hasn't put you off yet, then congratulations, you're off to a really good start. So, let's talk a little bit more about some of the things you might actually face if you end up working somewhere on local development projects in the field. A couple of the things that I learned over the years is that you really need to be resilient. Uh, the working and the living conditions are often not what you are used to from back home. But the best way to really understand the context that you're working in is to live very locally. Given the nature of the nonprofit sector, an intrinsic part of working in the field in humanitarian aid, relief work, or development is being aware of and sensitive to the local living conditions and quality of life. I'm sure there's no need to highlight that there's a lot of things that our lifestyle takes for granted, but it is fundamental that you are able to remove yourself from that and step outside your comfort zone. In the long run, you might be exposed to extreme weather conditions, poor diet, low food variety, or limited access to quality healthcare. Some situations that you might end up facing will also be extremely emotionally challenging. But all of that is something that you need to be ready for. It can be adventurous at times. But bear in mind that for you, it's temporary. You'll have somewhere to return to, but the communities that you might be working with do not. And that is where sensitivity, empathy, as well as open mindedness, flexibility, willingness to learn new things, and a fair amount of grit will come in handy. I remember going to a career fair once and stopping at a booth of an international development organization. I chatted to the lady representative, and she gave me this test that really stayed with me. Well, the test was for you to think of something that you really can't imagine life without. For example, something that you do every day, maybe something you drink or eat every day, your favorite food. I remember being like, oh, I don't think I could live without a coffee every morning. And she was telling me that she really likes to take a hot bath every week. The idea is that you try to live without that thing for a little bit and see how you feel and find different ways to vent or to kind of chill and calm down, feel happy without that particular thing. And if you can do that, then that's kind of what you will have to do if you end up working in the field somewhere. Okay, so you might think that all these things are a little silly, but these are actually really important strategies that you will need if you want to work in the field, in the nonprofit sector, in development for the long term. As mentioned, I spent a couple of years in the Middle East. What I found there is that the people are extremely friendly and extremely hospitable. They want to share their culture, their life with you, and they're a very proud nation. The country has suffered a lot. The Israeli occupation and the settlement is expansion through the Palestinian territories is the elephant in the room. But there are also many smaller local conflicts between different political factions and different levels of society. So, what I learned there is that you need to be cautious and politically and culturally sensitive. For example, traveling between Israel and Palestine was not very easy. Because I worked in the Palestinian territories, the visa I got was for restricted movement. We were only allowed to move kind of around the area that we worked at. Several times, especially going through borders and checkpoints, we witnessed different intimidation tactics of the IDF. We were held at the airport for 3 to 5 hours whenever we wanted to enter or exit the country because of the stamp that we had on our visa or in our passport. And none of these things are very, very pleasant. But there's really nothing you can do. And if you want to achieve your goal, if you want to get into the country, if you want to work there, if you want to accomplish something, these are just the circumstances that you have to endure. So going back, caution, resilience, and patience are key. After Palestine, I spent 2 years in China, just north of Shanghai, in a small town of Yangzhou. I worked in foreign language curriculum development, and the lessons I learned there were completely different to when I was in Palestine. The biggest barrier here, I would say, was the language. In China, especially in the rural areas, not many people speak English. Your best bet, if you are stuck somewhere or need some help, is to reach out to 10 years and younger, because those are the ones that will be able to communicate with you in English. I guess that's the next thing that I would say is language. It's really, or it's always extremely appreciated if you are working in a different country somewhere to try to learn the local language. It opens up so many doors, and people are extremely grateful when they see that you are taking an interest in their language and in their culture. And obviously, that is really important for your working relationships. If you remember, if we go back to what I was saying earlier, local input and local ownership is really key to any successful developmental project. And tasting local cuisine, learning the local language is the first step. In 2015, I relocated from China to Nepal, where I worked in emergency relief. With our Sansar, we set up an emergency shelter for earthquake-affected children, where we provided counseling, social services, and worked on possibly reuniting the children with their surviving relatives. I was only there for a couple of months, but it was by far one of the most powerful experiences that I had. The sense of urgency and the feelings of grief and loss are overwhelming. But on the other hand, so is the spirit, the hope, and the gratitude when a community comes together after something like this happens and you can be there to help. What tested me the most as a person as well as a professional were my last 3 years in Somaliland. As mentioned, Somaliland is kind of the northern part of Somalia. It's in the Horn of Africa. I worked there for 3 years as the assistant head of a Barso School of Science and Technology. This was a nonprofit school for very talented Somali girls and boys. And the aim was to contribute to stability in the region and improve the quality of life through high quality education. It was basically a secondary school starting in 7th grade all the way up to 12th grade. But what I really loved about this project and what kind of deepened my conviction in education as a means to kind of long-term sustained development was that it became much more than just a school. After the secondary school, there were plans to start a teaching college for women, and those teachers would then start teaching in a nursery and a primary school, so it would be kind of like this whole educational circle. But the impact that these structures had on the community as a large were much greater than just the education. From a Barso, graduates started being accepted on scholarships to Western universities and coming back with a completely new skill set. And being able to see how one thing leads to another, influences more people, it's like a beautiful ripple effect. And if it's done the right way, in partnership with the local communities, a little project like this can really energize an entire community and later an entire country. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges that you have to face to even get to that point. There's a lot of corruption in Somaliland. There's a lot of areas that are still quite dangerous to go. It's extremely hot, but you still have to be very conservatively or very modestly dressed. But these really are kind of like the little things and little frustrations on the way. Working in the nonprofit sector is really unique in this way. Sometimes the things that you experience are so unique and so bizarre, and they form the foundation to lifelong friendships because of what you experience and what you share with these people that sometimes other people don't really understand. The most important thing here is reflection and being able to take a step back and really look at what you're doing and why you're doing it. And as I did many times, you will end up feeling extremely grateful that you have had the chance to experience what you've experienced, and you will see that it is extremely rewarding. So anyway, I think at this point I've exhausted all my emotions. I hope that it was at least a little helpful and maybe you feel a little closer to some of the issues or the perks of working in this field. Definitely, if you have any kind of like specific questions, then let me know, reach out, and I'd be happy to chat to you.